Thanks so much for jumping on. I've been wanting to get you on for ages. I've been wanting to get you on since Guilt, to be honest, because I love that show so much. But Gold has just been what a gift as well, and I've watched the first four episodes of season two. Oh, it's great. It's so addictive.
No, I'm really glad. It's really glad you
Oh,
enjoyed it.
what was the hook for you to start with? What was it about these characters in the story that you kind of just wanted to dive in, really?
It's just such a good story. I mean, you kind of get pitched quite a lot of news stories as a sort of television writer, and a lot of the time when you look through it, or even things that I read about and think, oh, that sounds interesting, and I look into it more. The biggest problem, in my experience, is there's just not enough story. So you think, well, no, that is interesting and unexpected and surprising, but ultimately five things happen, and that would be a really good film.
Yeah.
But if you want to write six episodes of television, and particularly if you want to write with a decent pace and sort of burn through story, you just need so much to start with. Um, and it's so unusual to find a true story that is dynamic and unique and interesting and has that kind of scale, if you like, and that you can write it over that canvas. And the gold is, just the more I researched it, just the more there was to it, and it's incredible. It's this kind of sprawling story that goes off on all these mad tangents all over the world through lots of different worlds, lots of different characters.
So
So
many
for a
characters.
dramatist, yeah, for a dramatist, it's a bit of a dream, really.
And with that, it was funny because I was watching it and going, you probably know more than the police do when it comes to like, in terms of because we as the audience are, we kind of know more than there's the kind of police investigation going on, and then there's the kind of like the real, them existing and trying to kind of, do all these different characters of trying to keep away from the law in a way. And the way that you construct that is so clever and brilliant that I can't imagine how much research you had to do to kind of really get the kind of obviously there's creative license in there, you know what I mean? But just to be able to kind of navigate that journey that we go on of these kind of cut the cat and mouse sort of vibe to it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the research. So the first series, Thomas Turner researched it with me. We found we had so much material generated. The two of us did a book together called The Gold, which is
Yeah.
just out in paperback as well. But then Thomas and then Adam Fenn as well worked another researcher in the second series, and it's crazy. I mean, I really enjoy the research period, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, they do a lot of the kind of the hard yards, if you like, and I'm sort of reading what they're generating and saying, "Oh, let's get more of this. Don't worry about that so much. I'm not sure that'll fit." And it's just it's all pre-internet as well. This stuff, a lot of it was just pouring through newspaper archives from the 80s and early 90s, none of which is online. So, they're
Mm.
literally working through newspapers. They know rough dates of court cases, so they'll pull the newspapers for 2 weeks either side. It's kind of pretty old school journalistic research, really. And it just generates, with both series, what we end up with is just this enormous document that I'll then go through and slowly start finessing and say, like, I think here's the characters I want to concentrate on, here's the worlds I want to concentrate on, um, get more on those worlds, and then it's just constantly trying to boil it down and make it fit into six episodes. But really, it can be really exciting. You get an excited call from a researcher that just found something in an old newspaper article. A good example is in the opening episode of series two. There's a storyline around suggestion that a large amount of the Bricksmack gold ended up down a Cornish tin mine. That was one paragraph of an Evening Standard article in the late 80s. One throwaway paragraph where it said a tiny little story, and it said Cornish police have been there have been extensive police work going on Cornish moors, and it's emerged that there's a link with the Brinksmack gold, and that Cornish police are working on solid intelligence that a significant amount of Brinksmack gold has been hidden down a tin mine. And you read that, and that's from nearly 40 years ago now. That newspaper article, one paragraph in that, and that becomes a storyline in the opening episode of the second series.
Mm.
something that's never been talked about before. It's really exciting when you find these little nuggets, you know.
Yeah, doing the police's work for them.
Brian Boyce, who Hugh Bonneville plays in the show.
Yeah,
So Brian was kind of integral to the gold because I tracked him down, which wasn't particularly easy. He was very cautious about meeting me,
really,
and yeah, I remember the first time I went to his house. I won't say where he lives, but he lives in a little village, and I went in and he said, oh, he took me to a little kind of ante room and he said, oh, you can leave your stuff here. And I said, no, no, I'm fine. And he said, no, no, leave your stuff here. And I had to sort of empty my pockets. And it was like being checked into a police station. I think it sort of had no recording devices or anything. And then and then over time he started, trusting in me more and understanding the kind of story I wanted to tell. And I would go down probably a dozen times to his house and we'd sit around his kitchen table for a few hours talking about it, then have lunch in his garden and then ultimately he came to London and we had a nice long lunch, me, him, and Hugh Bonneville. And
oh
he
wow,
he really, I mean, he's in his late 80s, Brian. He's fit as a fiddle, really dynamic, fascinating guy. He was involved with the arrest of the Craze when he was younger and
wow.
ended up running the Brinksmat task force. He did lots of other stuff with the security services, which he couldn't really talk about. And he, so when you meet someone like him, it kind of gives you such insight to it. But I've just remembered the point of my story. My point was that after all the research, I would sometimes tell Brian something that he didn't know about the Brinks Mat case, and that was a real thrill. He'd say, "I didn't know that. Oh, that's really interesting," and he'd say, "Yeah, that could be true. That could have happened." So
Oh, I
that's the
love
guy who's
that.
in charge of it. So that's the level of research we go into.
How many of the kind of real characters did you actually meet or
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, some of which were
are
happy
still
for me
alive,
to
I
talk.
guess?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of them are around. Some of them didn't want to talk to me. Some of them I didn't feel it'd be appropriate to approach. Some of whom were happy for me to say that I talked to. Some of whom weren't. So it was lots of conversations. Some of them very easy. Some of them quite clandestine. Um, all interesting. I
Mm.
mean, one of the most fascinating conversations I had, which is in the book, is I spoke to Mickey McAvoy, who was the leader of the Brinksmat robbery, and that's the only interview he's ever given. And sadly, he's
Wow.
not around anymore. He died shortly after, and he that was a very strange conversation because what I found was because he'd been sentenced to 25 years and done a fair whack of that 25
Yeah.
years, he kind of, and he was a man who I think was maybe in the later stages of his life. He sort of felt like he had nothing to lose, and weirdly, I felt it was one of the interviews I had did where there was almost no agenda, where he was just telling it as it was, very open about the fact he did the robbery, wanted to correct some of the common misconceptions about the robbery.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember speaking to Brian Boyce after and saying I spoke to Mickey McAvoy, and that was my perception of the conversation. He went, "Oh yeah," he said, some of these old crooks, they've got nothing left to lose at this stage. They've done their time, so
Yeah.
we'll talk about it. So that was really interesting. But there was lots of conversations. I mean, I went, around Europe to speak to some people, and it was just a constant source of wonder, really, as a story.
It's the music in it is amazing. Like done such a great job with the score, but also, excuse me, those needle drops that are they do two things that what in this series there's that, there's diegetic stuff that you hear that's within the scene sort of thing that's of the time. Um and then just this brilliant use of needle drops of like whether it's over the end credits, like it's a great Stone Roses moment after one of the episodes season two, and it's almost like an extension of the episode in a way where the kind of the the almost like the swagger of that song kind of adds to the kind of like the feeling of that episode or like where we are with a character in that episode. It's so good. It's a brilliant thing that music does where it kind of makes you feel. Do you know what I mean? Do you, there's a load of questions in this, is which is like, did music come up in research at all with the characters? And then how do you work with music in terms of when you're writing? Do you write it into script? Are you really involved in that side of it?
Yeah, and music is I kind of torture myself and probably torture everyone else with deliberating over. music choices, and just trying to get it spot on. Guilt was probably the first show where I really invested heavily in the music, along with the directors and everyone else, of course, producers and script editor, everyone who kind of has been across it for so many years and has kind of views on the mood and the tone. But I think Guilt was very instructive to me in just how music can enhance a show, not just kind of partner a show, but really enhance it. And like you say,
Yeah.
Edith, in terms of that, the tone of it and the energy of it, and it can give you something just extra. And it's a chance for you to tell the audience the show you're making. I think your choice of commercial music, and it's too easy to say you're making a period show, shoving period music. It's not about that. It's about tone for me. And if the tone can also be in the period, that's great. I mean, with Guilt, just to divert briefly, it's like we use
Mm.
music from over about 40 years span,
Yeah.
because which I love.
But that was big, but like the character Jake had a record shop. So you kind of
Yeah.
like, that was like, that was almost like you almost felt like a lot of the time that those choices were in his head almost in a way, or him flicking through some of those records in his shop.
Yeah. And the record shops are eclectic places, for me, when I was growing up in Dundee, Groucho's record store. I'm sure you remember that, Edith. And
Yeah.
and
I
then I
think I
lived in
bought my
Leith.
soul to soul um hoodie from that very place. Spent my hard-earned saved pocket money to buy my
Oh,
British Racing Green with gold kind of lettering on it, soul to soul sweat hoodie.
been cheap.
It was not cheap. My mum
Yeah.
was like, "How much?"
And the bus to Dundee on top as well. It's no, Groucho's was a great. That was like a little portal to another world because they did the concert tickets
Absolutely.
and everything. The buses to Tea in the Park and so on. But
Mm.
I think so. Record shops. I lived in Leith for many years, and I used to go. There's a couple of great record shops in Leith Walk back then, and they are eclectic. You never know what's going to play when you go in, but it always sort of feels right, And they've got this great span. So I think Jake's record shop gave us weirdly that sort of liberty to go across the decades and just get the right mood. Um, and then with the gold, we were probably a bit more. We tried to be a bit stricter on period, but often there's a great song, and Ed Bailey is a brilliant music supervisor. People will quite rightly say, just to let you know, this is 2 years out, 3 years out, and I really don't mind. I always say, yeah, the characters managed to get hold of a bootleg
Yeah.
from the recording sessions just to kind of get us round it logically. But I think you kind of and what's really exciting, I think, about the second series of the Gold is really getting into sort of my era now in terms of this was stuff that I was listening to when it came out. Whereas the
Mm.
first series was a bit more before my time, music that I know and love, but the second series, it's like when you drop Primal Scream and things like that, it's like, well, I bought that when it was released. To be able to put that
Hmm.
into a show is really exciting. We've got some Oasis in later in the series, which is just nuts for me. As a huge fan, it's exciting when you get into the period where you were growing up, I suppose.
Yeah. Have you got tickets?
Let's chat when we're offline, Edith. You're my last bet.
I've not asked yet. I'm terrified to even ask. I've got
Well,
like,
it's funny. I was on the set of I'm making a show just now, and I was on the set the other day talking to Johnny Harris and Tom Burke, two of the actors. Sorry, Johnny Harris and
yeah,
Tom Hughes. Johnny Harris and Tom Hughes, and we were comparing what possible routes we had to tickets, and
I
we're all
love
trying to
that.
convince ourselves we had the most likely route, but they all sounded a bit shaky to me, to be honest. But let's
Yeah.
see.
Liam was renting a house not far from us in Selsley in Gloucestershire. And so he was walking his dog loads on Selsley Common. So I might have a couple of days deliberately taking my dog for a walk there in the hope that I bumped into him. Didn't
I
work.
think you're going to say, so you're going to buy a dog and you're going to start.
One step too far. Come on.
Yeah.
Um, just go back to Guilt quickly as well, because I really loved Arthur Sharp's score on that, and work on that. And he's a really talented composer, I think, as well. And I love the work actually that he did with Will on that. My God, I forgot the name of the film now, but that brilliant film they worked on together, the brothers. But yeah, talk to me about that side of it, and because that's really interesting. And I guess that's you've got directors who come and work on the show and they have to kind of have their input into
Yeah.
their vision for the show, but both musically and emotionally and stuff, but working with those composers and the score alongside those really big sounding um commercial pieces of music as well.
Yeah, it's just scores interesting because you just have to take a slight leap of faith. You look at someone's work and it's always brilliant, and you have interviews, and interviews always go very well. But you just have to feel you've got that connection, and it's a group decision, and the producers involved, and directors. I'm guilty of Robbie McKillop and Patrick Harkins, and then you've got Neil Webster and Neris and Kirsty, the producers, and you sort of yeah, you have the meetings and get a feel of it, and then you do make that leap of faith. And when you get that first cutting of score, it's always a bit nerve wracking, and and
Yeah.
and and it was really exciting. Yeah, Arthur did a fantastic job, and then you tweak it and give notes and try and fit it to scenes, and then and with the gold we had Simon Goff, who's incredible. He's We'll
Yeah.
come on to that. He's released his own album, but I think the thing with the score for me is getting it right for the scenes, but also I think there's my big fear always is overscoring a show. I think that's very common, and it's much easier to cut, obviously. So I think what we usually do is slightly overscore a show and then work out. And then my big thing when I'm really watching it, when we're kind of really getting to the nitty gritty of it, is do we need score in this scene? It's always a
Yeah.
question to ask. And I think some shows they just think that'll add 10%, that'll add 10%. But some of you've got almost every scene with score. And I just think it snaps you out the action a little bit. You lose a bit of the
Mm.
reality. So I always think sometimes less is more with it, which still means there can be a fair whack. But
Yeah.
just, I think that's a question that you should really be asking yourself when you watch those final mixes is, is this additive?
Yeah.
Are you ending up accidentally having three scenes in a row with score in it? And it makes it less powerful when you do bring it in. So
Yeah.
overscoring something, and I think composers would agree with that as well. That they'd rather make the mark in smart ways than feel they're just kind of soaking it with it.
Let's talk about Simon. Why was he right for the job, and what was it about his work that really stood out for you?
Anil Karia was the lead director in the first series, and then Lawrence Goff did the block two, and then Patrick Harkins did the second series. But I think it was probably around with us and Anil Karia looking at options. I can't remember if Neil knew Simon or knew of his work, but he certainly was part of the conversation quite early on. And we thought it was really interesting. One of the things with Simon, and I always like with composers when they're musicians, and they're all musicians to some degree, but he's a kind of very much a musician. He does
Hmm.
gigs and he plays all sorts of instruments. Um, and I just thought he offered us something in early conversations that thought it'd be kind of dynamic, very, very cinematic, and just kind of quite deep and cool as well. Like we talked about sort of the industrial influence and things like this, and you just, but you just look a lot at their work and have a good chat. And sometimes off that first conversation, they'll send some specific other examples that they think might fit in because of what you said. Sometimes they'll run off and make something for you.
Yeah.
And he just felt great from the start. He lives in Berlin, and so we didn't actually. I don't think we met until we locked the whole thing, and he came over for a
Wow.
screening. So it's just lots of Zoom calls and conversations, and it's the score. It's fantastic.
Mm.
It's really good. I mean, he released an album of the score for both the first and second series, and you can listen to that music.
Absolutely.
It's
And
just
it's
as
that
enjoyable.
and that thing as well that he's done so brilliantly is because, like we were talking earlier, there are so many characters, and it would be so easy to have kind of, like individual themes for every character and every kind of storyline. And it's kind of like the way that that's been kind of streamlined, so to speak, really makes it more impactful in terms of what he has created.
Yeah, I think there's often a temptation. Oh, let's give everyone a new world and stuff, and it just starts to sound mad. It's kind of
Yeah.
schizophrenic.
Yeah.
There needs to be a sort of tonal unity to the whole thing, and also I like recurring score over the show. I like if we hit upon some lovely bit of score, use it again. It becomes a little signature thing. So which they always like to hear because it means they don't have to do any more work. But no, he was brilliant, Simon. He's done the second series as well.
What are there any specific scores or films for you where, kind of as a fan, both in TV and film really, that where the music kind of you really kind of realized how important the music was to the storytelling?
Well, two of my favorite shows, in fact, if not my two favorite shows. I mean, I thought The Sopranos just used music so brilliantly. And as you talked about earlier, Edith, that thing over the end titles where a lot of people don't think that's significant, and I suppose sadly now people will say, a lot of people don't watch the titles, but I mean, I think that outro music
Mm,
as a little sign off to the episode that you've just watched, and almost with that music, you're almost confirming to the viewer that they've watched the episode in the right way because you're saying, yes, this is the mood that you're in,
hmm.
this is the mood that we're in, having made it, and the music kind of recognizes that. And I think that so that's something I always remembered watching The Sopranos, of almost leaving you kind of giddy at the end because of their choice of music over the end titles, which could be anything, famously John Cooper Clarke, or we could, whatever they
Yeah.
went for, and then score wise, Chernobyl, which I think is the kind of
Oh, Hilda.
that for me is the sort of I think that's the one sort of true television masterpiece of the last 10 years, where Chernobyl. I just think it's incredible. And I've spoken to Craig Mazin about it because we were bizarrely nominated on the same nomination list for something a few years ago. But I just thought it was incredible, and the score of that was, talk about immersing yourself in a world. It's fantastic. So
Yeah. I was
yeah,
lucky
it
enough
can be
to
so
chat to
powerful.
Hilda about that
All right.
actually. And just about how she how she physically went to places to kind of capture kind of sounds to kind of influence and inspire kind of what she, what even what instruments she used or how she used the instruments and stuff to create that score. It's brilliant. She's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice
So
actually
it's
connection with Simon actually because he worked on Joker, didn't he? He did some work on Joker Folie Deux. So there we
yeah,
go.
that's
There's
right. Yeah, yeah,
a nice wee thread through there.
yeah. Nice, very nice.
What about film
What about film? What
in terms of
there's
in terms of kind of soundtracks for you?
well, I don't know. I mean, the only film I can think of is the last one I watched all the time, and the last one I watched was the Bob Dylan film, and now that was a bit of a cheat because they had the music, but I think that was just an incredible watch. But
Yeah,
I think for me, it's like you know, it's the kind of thing. I think when you get an area of television or film right, it should become invisible and then weirdly memorable.
yeah,
So the score and the direction and the writing, it should just all fit. So you're watching something as a whole. And I often think where you get unstuck, it's where one of those people involved are sort of promoting themselves in a way that they're trying to draw attention to their own craft, and it's not part of the whole. So
yeah.
and that writing, I can absolutely be with the writing, and I'm sure I've done that in the past where I'm a bit verbose or flourishing, and it jumps out in the scene because you're just creeping away from how that character would naturally talk. Same with direction, it gets too gimmicky, and it feels like the director sort of waving to the viewer, and the same with score. It can just be a bit over the top, and again, they're throwing everything at it
Mm,
in a way that's not quite connected to the material. So the stuff I love would be when I actually just think about shows and television and films that I love. And if I went back and watched that, I'd say, God, look at that score. It's incredible. And what a
yeah,
great choice of track. But you shouldn't be noticing these things.
absolutely.
It should be
Yeah.
just completely unified and as such almost invisible.
Well, that's kind of almost what I try. I don't get the luxury of doing that in kind of preparation for this, where mostly with more film than TV, where I get the chance to go and enjoy the film and just sit and watch it, and then have a second viewing where I can kind of like make a point of kind of looking out for things. So I think because It's a shame sometimes where you know you've only got one chance to see the film before you do an interview, and you're kind of almost like being distracted from the enjoyment of just being in it to kind of going, wait a minute, I need to write that down kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So that's the
That's the
dream
funny
for me
thing.
as well.
I got sent these things the other day for the goal too, where they're doing they do signing off all the kind of marketing publicity things, but they do these little snippets online of bits and bobs from the show.
Yeah.
And anyway, they sent it through, and I said, "Look, I think you've dropped the score off." And they said, "No, we can't use score because it's licensing or whatever," which is
Yeah.
I hadn't realised. I understand, but those little snippets without the score looked mad to my to my eye.
Yeah.
To my eye, as I'm not a social media expert, but I thought this is mad. Like there was a running scene, and without the score, it looked like bloody Benny Hill or something. Whereas in reality, I think it's a really dramatic sequence. So
Yeah.
it kind of shows you how important it is as well.
Yeah. Do you write to music? Do you have music on when you're writing?
All the time, and I kind of put a playlist together slowly as I'm writing a project of tracks that feel of an era or of a mood, probably more. But I
Yeah.
can play music not when I'm outlining. If I'm outlining, I'm just on my whiteboards and getting increasingly fraught and trying to kind of work it all out structurally. When I'm
Hmm.
writing, once I have the bones of a script and I just want to really enjoy the dialogue and stuff, I'll often play music then, definitely.
Yeah. This is a random question, but I always get like, I don't know, it's like you always get a slight, oh, a little flutter when you hear your name on screen sort of thing. Is Harry Bowman a real character?
Listen, I'm afraid it's not inspired by yourself, Edith,
I wasn't
but
expecting it to, but it's just
it,
like, oh, it might be
it's a good
related.
question. It's a great question because he's inspired by Dave Psycho Bowman, Dundee
Dundee
United
United
midfield.
player who I'm
You
related
did,
to.
you know Dave Bowman,
Hmm.
Edith. I know Dave Bowman.
Yeah, he's like, I think he's like, his dad's my dad's cousin or something.
That's fantastic. Well, look, I know Bo. Every time I go to Tannadice, I seek him out, and he's still
Hmm.
on the staff there. And I went up to the United, very kindly invited to the United training ground a few months ago, maybe last time I was in Scotland. Went along with my boy, and Bo came over and had a good chat and showed us around and everything. And yeah, so anyway, that's funny. I
Yeah,
didn't realize you were. And did you meet him when you were younger? Was he not quite a
yeah.
scary relative?
No, not at all. It's that kind of sense of pride. His auntie Jenny actually is still in Pittenweem, and weirdly, when I was back, when was I back? Easter, bumped into her in coffee shop, little coffee shop in Pittenweem. So yeah,
Well, he famously,
I
his
mean, he was
nickname
a
was
brutal
Psycho.
player. Yeah.
Yeah, his nickname was Psycho, and when he went to Forfar, he famously got. I think he managed to get four red
Oh
cards
my
in
God.
one game. The last of which was dismantling the referee's dressing room door. So anyway, there you go. Yeah, David Bowman's the inspiration for Harry Bowman, and yeah, this is lots of kind of surnames like that. Sometimes it's a lot of it's because it's compositing characters.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of compositing of characters because there's so many real life people involved. So you do have to rename them.
It's just that thing on screen where obviously people refer to him as Bowman. And so I
Yeah.
get that. So you're just like, what?
That's
So
funny. Well, there you go.
Shouted
It's
at on
your
screen.
it's your uncle once removed Dave. That
There we
was
go.
the
Psycho
great
Bowman.
question. Yeah.
What is next? What are you working on next? Can you talk about
I'm
it or
working
not?
on a I'm working on a show called Legends for Netflix,
Ah,
which is
yes.
a
Coogan
six
and yeah.
yeah, Steve Coogan, Tom Burke,
Oh, wow,
Johnny
what a
Harris,
cast.
Haley Squires, and Melanine. It's a brilliant story. It's another show inspired by real events. It's about customs investigators in the 1990s who went undercover into the international drugs world. So it's an incredible story.
Wow.
True story. I've been again doing lots of interviews and research with the people involved. We're on week 11 of 17, so
Oh,
hence I
wow.
look pretty
Thank
knackered.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
for like kind of, like dropping yourself into this then in the middle of it.
Well, I'm
Crikey.
about to, as soon as we finish, Edith, I'm about to drive to, I'm not quite sure, some distant part of North London to work until midnight tonight. So it's
Oh, Neil.
anyway, can't complain. It's great. It's really it's a really exciting show, and yeah, I think that I mean we're working on it, and then it'll be edited and out at some point next year. But I'm
Brilliant.
excited with the goal coming out. I think because I've been so busy, I sort of forgot. You kind of forget that you've got TX coming up, and it's quite good in a way because I get a wee bit nervous before something comes out, but I've kind
Ah.
of not really thought about it yet. But
Oh, well, it's fantastic. Having watched 4 episodes of it, it's fantastic. It really, really is. It's really transportative as well, in terms of those locations and things that you're at and it just gives you kind of like, my God, this is literally kind of covering, it's crazy.
geographically, where it goes is amazing. And we shot. I mean, that was interesting because we shot half the shoot was abroad. We did half of it here and then half of it in Tenerife. So Tenerife plays about five different countries, and does it very well. I mean, it's really interesting Tenerife. And yeah, I don't know if you've been to Tenerife
Never been to
much.
Tenerife, no.
So the south of it is very touristy and very arid, sort of as you'd expect. And then, but the north is, we stayed in the north in the capital, Santa Cruz, which is lovely. It's like Seville or something. It's all like cobbled streets and really pretty. But then there's just these bizarre little ecosystems within the island. So there's one valley that is just very tropical and lots of palm trees. So we that was Burma for us, And then there's one beach because it's volcanic sand. It's the
Yeah.
dark sand. There's one beach that's got golden sand, and we kind of shot the shit out of that from different angles for various options. And then and then it played. So it played the Caribbean for us. Played
Wow.
real life Tenerife through the Palmer story. I think it played mainland Spain, Burma, somewhere else as well. I can't really
Wow.
remember, but it was great fun, really, really
Yeah.
good fun. And I think that excitement for me of foreign film, it reminds me when I first television I ever made was Bob Servan, and
Hmm.
that feeling I had of staying at my mum and dad's in Broughty Ferry and getting up and walking to Bob's house, past the paper shop where I did my paper round, and going for a pint in Broughty Ferry after filming, or going for a Chinese with Brian or whatever, and that raw excitement of I cannot believe that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
That that comes back to me now, um, foreign filming. When I'm driving through the sun, thinking I can't believe that I thought of this thing back at home, and we're off to make it now in a foreign country. So it's yeah, very exciting. I think it's a great story. It's been a brilliant show to make the gold, and I'm really excited we got to do the second series because it really is the second half of the story. So
Yeah.
yeah, pleased
Which
to
I
make
think
it.
is the kind of is this sort of almost like, the bit that people didn't really know about or don't really know about. That's what's so exciting about it. I just wanted to say as well, just quickly on the guilt before I let you drive off to North London, is I just think it was such a great show and I just adored it so much, everything about it. And I feel like you did such a great service to Scotland as well and the creatives in Scotland in terms of what that show did. It really raised the bar in terms of what can be made in Scotland, how Scottish stories can be told, both kind of aesthetically, but just kind of the energy of the show and the confidence in it as well. And I just think that you just did so much service to Scotland and Scotland creatives in terms of going, come on, guys, this is kind of, this is what we can do.
I really appreciate that, Edith. And I know you've said similar before. I always appreciate the support you gave it. And I think that a lot of people did. They got on board early because it was just an amazing thing to watch it come together. And all you can hope as a writer is that people come on board and enhance your work. And
Mm.
and that happened with Guilt in terms of everyone that works in the show and the producers and the directors and then the performances are just incredible.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just, I felt very liberated with Guilt. I mean, it was a very strange thing. And this is why I think it had its own idiosyncratic voice, its very unique voice. I'd hope. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's definitely unique. And it's because it was a weird commissioning process that it went through the head of BBC Scotland at the time, Ewan Angus, who'd backed me with Bob Servant back in the day. I met up with him and he said, I've got this new channel and we're looking for a drama. And I said, well, I've written pilot of this show called Guilt, set in Edinburgh, these two brothers. And he said, "Oh, send it to me." And I sent it to him the Friday, and he texted me over the weekend and said, "We should try and make this."
Oh, wow.
And he made it. And it went kind of through him. And then weirdly, I think because my background, it sort of got some money from comedy, but it was never a genre show within the BBC. So it never went through a traditional editorial process.
Yeah.
And I think that's why all the rough edges never got knocked off, and that's why it had a lot of humor. It had, a lot of music, and it had much more humor than anything that I think you'd have seen on BBC drama at the time.
Mm.
And so it was this strange little thing of just getting a thing to screen without it going through a lot of those um, more regimented, I think,
Filters.
editorial. Yeah, exactly. And people thinking, look, maybe knock some of the humor out so it feels a bit more within our broader drama remit and all that stuff. Casting wise, we were just allowed to cast the actors really that we wanted to cast. We didn't have to get who were seen as like names that would mean something down south. A lot of the
Yeah.
kids. And it was because it was launching that channel as well, Edith. It was like this is about showing Scotland and being very Scottish while being hopefully universal in terms of storytelling. And so proud to give. I mean, it's my most personal show without any shadow of a doubt. There's all sorts of things and aspects of my life in there. And obviously, I lived in Leith for a long time, being a Dundonian, but then probably lived in Leith for about 10 years on and off. And um, it just feels very personal, the humour and the voice of it. And I think what's great for me is it did so well, and it was so exciting to see it do well and kind of get critically response and everything. But then internationally, it's nuts, and I do feel huge pride to that. It got remade in India, and these two brothers, yeah, it got remade in India. I'll send you the trailer. It's hilarious. It was called Bloody Brothers, and it was these two Indians, and they were at a wedding in the Himalayas, and they knocked someone over. And yeah, it's a proper
Wow.
Indian series, which is just extraordinary, and then it's gone out, all around the world. I had lovely reviews in New York Times and things, and it's just, I, it, I'm genuinely not being entirely sort of selfish about my reaction to that. I do feel there's great pride in it,
Good.
and it's really exciting. And you read these. I love reading reviews in foreign newspapers where they talk about Kenny Burns and they talk about Leith Legals. That's Leith
Yeah.
Legals advert there. 99.99 wills. Yeah, make sure your loved ones are taken care of. So, hearing people talk seriously about these goings on in Leith in these foreign newspapers and podcasts or whatever, I just think it's nuts, and I think it's a really distinctive show, and so many brilliant Scottish actors, and even the casting. Sorry, I know I'm banging on a bit, but even because I'm so sort of proud of it as a show, but the casting, and this is so specific, where I was like, I really want East Coast Scots in it, and the confusion that caused in some conversations, down south, because and I think no, it's very distinctive, the voice
Mm.
and the tone of it, and I always think there's a slight. I know Brian talks about this a lot, in terms of the East Coast and the West Coast humour and thing, and I think it's true. I think the East Coast has a slightly more absurdist touch, if you like, and the West Coast has got this real realism.
Yeah.
And I think that, I always think from Dundonian, being Dundonian, that my stuff arcs back to William McGonagall, basically. And it's kind of like Michael Mara, that kind of brilliant storytelling, but always that little absurdist touch. And I think that East Coast performance, I think you get that. Like Eamon Elliott, and, he
I love
just,
it.
everything he does as Kenny makes
So,
me laugh. And the
yeah.
best hands actor in the business, I always think, is those fluttery hands. And all of them, Mark, Jamie, and we just Egg and Stu Bowman was from he's from Wormit,
Yeah.
Stuart Bowman, and
Wow.
we just kind of stuffed it full of East Coast actors, and it just came
It's great.
together. And yeah, very proud of it. But thanks again for your support of it, Edith. Always remember, and
No.
thanks for not making a huge thing about me walking the wrong way off the stage at the Scottish BAFTAs as well, Edith.
It's a big moment. Do you know what I mean? It's fine. It's all right. It's good. Yeah.
That walk I had to do back to this stage to then exit, it's probably the longest walk of my life.
It's the fact they make you do it as well. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Oh God. Well, listen, I'll no doubt see you on that stage again soon, hopefully. But I'll listen. Thanks so much for your time today, especially considering you're right in the middle of such a big project as well. But yeah, thanks for sticking with the gold as well and giving us this second season because it really is just such a treat. And it's lovely to chat to you. Thanks so much, Neil.